All right, so now we're going to start setting up the legal foundation of our company. And really, we'll go through the several different forms of what that can be. But as you'll see from your text and from what we've spoken in some of the previous interviews, that how we set our company really is going to be different for each individual business owner or entrepreneur. So for instance, for Nana's Donuts, if it was just one owner, it's easy to be a sole proprietor. And as with a sole proprietorship, you just set up the company, you run all of the business's taxes through your own personal financial tax returns. But here's the problem, you're running it through your house. Let's just put it that way. When you run it through there personally, therefore you're at exposure for any risk. If anything were to happen and your company were to get sued, you could be personally liable. Then you have several different types of partnerships, and there is even a limited liability type of partnership that you could file for. I do recommend when you formally go to establish that, sit down with an attorney and figure out what form of business would be best for you. But with partnerships, they're a little bit different than a corporation in the sense that most partners will have a say. Now, you may have a silent partner, but you may have a partner that you just are looking for an investment for and you don't mind sharing the profits with, but you want to run your business. And that goes back to what you brought up before about control. At what point are you giving up control versus when are you getting value-added intelligence from that partner? And then the third is the corporation, and there's several different types. There's a limited liability corporation, a C Corp, and an S Corp. Now with Clear Collar, we had a management team. We had identified a board of advisors and a board of directors, but we needed to raise a large sum of money to do so. And in doing so, we had over 40 investors, and we didn't want 40 investors in as a partnership to run the day-to-day operations that can happen in a partnership. So therefore, we set up a C Corp, and as we talk in human capital in the next segment, we'll talk about how investors work with the board of directors who work to run the company. The next, and what I feel is just as important as the legal foundation of the company, is the agreements. And with that, whether you're a partnership or a corporation, you need to have good, solid agreements. Because what are our expectations going into business? Success. We're all going to make a lot of money. Everything's going to work out great. We get really excited about that. And it doesn't always happen. And there's different types of agreements. And really what I say is, let's talk about what we're hoping to achieve. Let's talk about the things that could go wrong and how we will address it when that comes up. So within those agreements, let's talk about a couple of the government agreements that can come up. Trademarks, patents, copyrights, right? We had an emergency room nurse that had a patent on a transparent cervical collar, right? The patent was worth what he paid for it, but it wasn't in the market. And at that point, we had to get it out in the market and create value for it. And one thing I'd like to say about patents or trademarks or copyrights is they're also only as valuable as you are willing to defend it. So if somebody was to infringe on that, his recourse could be to the detriment of whatever their sales were. If they were making tens of millions of dollars and wanted to offset that with a lawsuit against him, they could squash his patent. Because if anyone in here in this room got a patent on something and was sued by a Procter & Gamble or any other company that had more resources, we may be in the right and still not be able to defend ourselves. So I do say that people think I've got a patent, I'm secure forever. What you really need to do is start building value that you would actually have recourse in order if you were ever infringed upon with that. Same with copyrights. So with City Startup Labs, they were set up as a nonprofit to help the previously incarcerated and help them start their entrepreneurial endeavors. And no matter where we are on the social level of poverty versus wealth with plenty of resources, we all have these great ideas. And how we execute them is no different. And as we establish our business plan in identifying these resources, we can at least see what it takes to get there. So what I must say about City Startup Labs is it's providing an avenue and a path to find out how they can take those same ideas that we have and execute on them as we would. Within the agreements, we also have agreements with creditors. If you sign a loan, you sign a bunch of loan documents. I mean, the amount of loan documents you sell just to buy a car is ridiculous, but those are their agreements saying, this is what we're going to do if you don't pay, this is how long you have to pay. Fee schedules and what it takes, and no different than your mortgage as well. And the last one I want to talk about is within the agreements is the agreements between the partners and owners. So we talked about the legal forms of business, but your partnership agreement, your corporate ownership agreement, your bylaws, your any contracts, any licensing, this is covered there. I find these agreements to be just as, if not more important, than what form of business you take. Because when it all boils down to it, you're looking to establish, set, and define expectations. If we make a gajillion dollars, this is what we're going to do with it. If we lose everything, this is what's going to happen. There are agreements that cover if there's the death of a partner, if there's a divorce, if there is an infringement on the patent. So with Clear Collar, they had all of these agreements set, all of the expectations were set with all of the shareholders that brought over $2 million in funding. There were agreements for licensing. Once the company started, there were several more patents and copyrights and trademarks filed after that. And all of it was just to build expectations. So everything worked out great, didn't it? Well, sometimes you set up those expectations and you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, right? So even with that, with the original owner, it was a great idea. It didn't hit the market. And when things started to go south, the question was, what happened? This isn't what I thought was going to happen. And even though all of those items were covered, sometimes we sign agreements, sometimes we look into these things, and we have things we think they're worth and what they actually are. And it's why I say, hey, it is why we want to spend time to go through our agreements. What do we want in there? What is important? Because we're all happy when everything's great, but when things aren't, how are we going to deal with it? And how are we going to not let us tear apart and undo not only this, but every other thing we've done in the last several modules?
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NexagyEducation or visit CasmerWard.com to catch up on previous episodes.